All right, Suzanne, anybody else waiting? Otherwise, we'll. Okay.
Looks like you're good.
Rabbi Josh is going to kick us off, but let me just introduce folks. You probably know him. I'm Jerry Doctrow, longtime Beth Am member, and we're going to do this presentation. And Becki Bees, who's in my screen up on the upper left, is the marketing director of Roland Park Place, who's worked with me on putting it together, and I'll provide color commentary as we go through it. So with that, I think Rabbi Josh will let you do an intro and we'll jump in.
Thank you very much, Jerry. And thank you so much for organizing this whole series that I think is just going to be incredibly fruitful and meaningful to the whole community. I was just thinking about, when you asked me to give an introduction, the text from the book of Ecclesiastes from L'kol zman ve'et l'kol chefetz tachat hashamayim. There's a season set for everything, a time for every experience under heaven. And when we think about gerontology and aging in 2023, the seasons are expanding. People are living longer and are more active and have more options than ever before. And that's a wonderful thing. And I know that as Jerry's going to present a little bit later in his presentation, that also can lead to a little bit of stubbornness of people not wanting to think about these conversations about how do we actually fill these later chapters of our lives in a full and meaningful way. So I just see this as a wonderful opportunity to just to think about how we, as another group in our scenario would say, how we age wisely and are there for each other and to make meaningful plans. So just a few logistical notes that this is the first session of a 3-part session that Jerry has helped organize. I know we're going to be talking about senior housing and care option plans tonight, but I think there are just some underlying goals for this series. Last year we had a session led by Eliza Feller about funeral pre-planning, and we had a great turnout for that. Almost 40 Beth Amers were there on Zoom. And that besides that information being really useful, I think there was a sense that we really have a responsibility as a community to continue to have conversations about this and to be able to provide meaningful information about aging and care and housing and other topics that might be relevant to Beth Am congregants. So this is kind of an effort to continue on that. And I think it's just a really great, really, really important. As you know, that we at Beth Am are committed to congregant to congregant. I think this is just such a great example of a number of Beth Am congregants providing information to others, especially since there isn't so much great information, especially about this topic tonight. So I'm not going to say much more because I think it's more important that we get into the topic. I know Jerry is a perfect person to be organizing this. He's just spent 20 years as a real estate consultant, banker, a board member focusing on senior housing and healthcare, real estate issues. So he's definitely knowledgeable, but probably more important than that, he cares about this community. He cares about Beth Am and about this topic. So I'm just thrilled that you are organizing that. The last thing I want to say is I know, and Jerry, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I know we have a number of Beth Am congregants who are going to be panelists for the different sessions. Are Fred and Elaine on the panel for this night? Is that right?
The panel is 27th, so we're
okay. So as we go through the series, we're going to get to hear from others as well. And I'm just incredibly grateful for everyone who's giving of their time and expertise and their life experience so that we can all learn from them. So let's enjoy this. I know that there's going to be opportunities for feedback both to Jerry and the presenters and also to Susanna and other people at Beth Am. So if there are things that you hear that spark ideas for things that we should do in the future, the lines of communication are wide open, and just a pleasure to be with everyone tonight and to see your faces. So Jerry, take it away.
Thank you. So I think everyone's muted. We'll try to keep you that way, but if you have a question, you can use the chat function to ask Susanna or Becki, and they'll deal with that. So questions and refer stuff to me, and technical issues you can have, they'll sort out with you as well. So this started really with a couple of Beth Am members talking to me about their interests in considering what we call a life plan community. And we'll talk more about the details of that later. But Beth Am members age 65 and above are active, well-educated, and many interests and activities. And like most seniors, particularly baby boomer seniors, they have no interest in looking at seniors housing. That's the general viewpoint. I have a group of about 12 friends I've known from elementary school. We talk about it. They're not interested. I did a test run to one of the wise aging groups. People were not interested in looking at this stuff. So that's one of the interesting things, unique things about seniors housing is the consumer doesn't really want that the product. But there's a recent national survey done by ARP and NORC, which is a survey research firm, just came out last week, that it's a panel of 1,000 seniors around the U.S. specifically designed to match the income and racial and geographic split of our country. So it's supposed to be really reflective of seniors as a whole. And there's some interesting things in there. One is 25% of people over 50 in 2022 looked for long-term care, either for themselves or for a family member, which I thought that was dramatically higher than I would have expected. Particularly again at that age. About half are looking for their parents, the rest are looking for themselves or another family member. And the other interesting thing about the survey is they ask you to describe the 4 leading emotions, which were anxiety, frustration, confusion, and fear. And again, they asked another question, and people were really interested in getting good information about what their alternatives are. And that's what we're going to try and do here today. And again, what it started is, as I said, a couple of Beth Am members talking to me about it. And once I started doing some research, it seemed to be much better to do it, a more formal presentation and share with a wider group. So that's what we're going to do. I'm going to share my screen and put up the slides. Okay, can everybody see that? Okay. All right. So we're calling it Selecting a Life Plan Community in Baltimore. We're going to talk about a full range of facilities, life plan and others. We're going to talk about home care. And so we're going to talk about a full range of options. But Roland Park Place, again, the people that started asking me questions were asking about life plan, which is the facility to charge an entrance fee and provide a full range of services. And it is the most discretionary purchase or decision that a senior can make in terms of seniors housing, because they're designed to deal with healthy residents. So people aren't moving in most cases because they've got a pressing need. They're moving in because they made a decision about their lifestyle, and they think this is a good outcome. Tonight we're going to talk about the range of activities. Okay, it's copyrighted. Again, we're going to give everyone access to a copy of these slides. But if you're going to reproduce them or share them with people, we ask that you let us do that. One other disclaimer: I'm on the board of Roland Park Place. I talk a little bit more about my background, but I joined Roland Park Place, which is a life planning community at 40th and Roland Avenue. I can see it from my window, Becki is the marketing director there, who has a lot of insights because she deals with people day in, day out who are making these decisions. But this is not an ad for Roland Park Place. We both think the good things about the facility, but we'll cover the full range of choices that you have. Sorry. So you can read the detail on this, but I have about 20 years experience, as Jerry Doctrow said, in seniors housing care as a real estate consultant, stock market analyst, investment banker. And I did in the late 80s a study for the Associated, which was assessing the housing needs of the Jewish elderly population. And that document, the Associated uses a strategy to develop probably thousands of now seniors housing, mostly low-income apartments, but they do assisted living. And so, and they also do a lot of support for people that are living in Northwest Baltimore apartments. So that's how I got started sort of with the Associated and this topic in some ways, and have done a lot of studies since then. Becki, as I said, Vice President of Sales and Marketing Director for Roland Park Place since 2004. So she's seen some tough housing markets, some good housing markets, and Roland Park Place just opened an expansion, so that has created more activity and more options for people there. And Becki, you want to talk about anything else about your background?
Yeah, I mean, I've been here 18 years, so certainly have in a number of different roles, mostly in sales and marketing, and then did do the master's program in management of aging services at the Erickson School at UMBC. So pretty broad. So I feel like I've heard every question, but you never know. So if you have any questions that I can help with tonight, I'll be happy to do that.
Thanks. Sorry, I'm a little jittery here on my buttons. All right, so there's three parts to this, as Jerry Doctrow said. One, what we're talking about tonight is senior housing care options, and we'll cover a full range of things you can get in your home and get through various communities. Tomorrow night, on the 17th, which is Tuesday, not Monday, because we're going to avoid Martin Luther King's birthday, we're going to talk about life plan communities in detail with the entrance fees, costs, what your choices are. And then we're going to have a panel on the 23rd with 4 or 5 Beth Am members who have made the move to a life plan community, and they'll talk to you about their process, their experience. So I think it'll be very worthwhile. Okay, so we'll jump in. Again, if you have questions, just shoot them off as we go through. The senior housing care industry groups their projects or types of properties into 5 categories. 1, independent living, 2, assisted living, memory care, skilled nursing, and life plan. And the IL, MC, and SN or SNF or skilled nursing facility, you'll hear a lot when you talk to folks. We're going to go take a look at each of them, give you a sense of size, pricing, what care there are, and again, you feel free to ask questions as we go through it. The key thing is make a life plan community different, and they used to be called CCRCs. But I think over the last few years, the industry has tried to make clear that life plan communities are designed to enrich your lives and not just provide care as you get sick and you get older. And what makes life plan communities unique, just for a few more minutes on those, is there are 350 units or so on average. The ones that Erickson runs in Baltimore are over 1,500 units. And they provide a much broader range of activities, social programs, physical unit types than assisted living or independent, which are much smaller. And again, a life plan community typically has independent, assisted, memory care, and skilled, sometimes called a health center, all on one campus. So your needs are fully met as your healthcare needs may change. I think one of the other things we'll talk about, and more in tomorrow, but life plan communities also have a Medicare sort of management role, So they've got doctors on staff in most cases, and they can help you manage your healthcare needs. Home care is grouped into 4 categories. You think home care is home care, but not the way it works for reimbursement and licensing. One is companion care, which people come in, literally talk to you, do your dishes, do the laundry, basic bathing, that sort of thing. But it's not really health care. Health aid is sort of a step up. Again, often they won't do some of the other stuff. You get 2 people if you want to cover your household activities or and healthcare needs. But health aid is got a little more education, some training, and probably is authorized to give medications, basic medications, maybe check vitals, that sort of thing, but limited healthcare needs. And skilled care is particularly an RN or a specialized person coming in to do shots. We have one of our neighbors here who gets medication through a feeding tube or a port, that's probably the right word. And so people that do that are more highly skilled, and there's a lot of opportunities for that because it's cheaper to provide that sort of care outside the hospital, in the home. And finally, hospice care, which we're not going to spend a lot of time talking about that. We can come back to these topics. And one of the things that I'd really like to hear from you is what you thought was good about this presentation, what things you suggest to make it better, and if there's other topics you want us to follow up on, like hospice, services associated. I think we can do that if there's enough interest. Okay. Any questions about that before we move on? Okay. And can you hear me okay? Okay.
Yes.
All right. So independent living, we've got an estimate of 152 properties in the Baltimore Metropolitan Area. So there's a wealth of choices here. Monthly fees, $1,800 to $4,000. And it provides hospitality, obviously an apartment, full-size apartment, but then hot meals, transportation, housekeeping, exercise, and social activities. So hotel-like services, life safety, emergency call buttons, 24-hour staffing, sprinklers, some but not all. And what has happened today is there aren't that many pure independent living properties as there used to be. When back in the, say, 70s and 80s, building essentially senior apartments with dining facilities and some social programs and that sort of thing was sort of the way it was done. But what's happened is since the late 90s, assisted living, where you're dealing with people that have needs, are not independent. They have needs getting up, getting dressed, getting around, dealing with sometimes financials and that sort of thing. That has emerged a more important driver. And most independent living facilities have gone back and retrofitted assisted and memory care with IL, but there are still some freestanding buildings around. So these are, again, probably 10 years old or so, maybe a little older than some of the others. 140 units, full-size kitchens, dining, common areas, and I would say few properties offer pools and gyms. That's the sort of stuff that you can do with life plan community we tend to get, but some of these are fairly well equipped. Again, most of the properties you see out there today are combinations of IL and other things, and the way they're defined in these counts is if it's majority independent living, it would be called independent living, and it is predominantly assisted, to be categorized that way. So examples here, and you've probably seen these or seen them in advertisements. But I should also say Baltimore, Washington is a real center for seniors housing care. Some of the pioneering companies like Sunrise Senior Living, which really developed the assisted living in the late 90s, started in Washington, still based there. There's one of the big REITs, Omega, is based in Hunt Valley, and Erickson, which has developed these very large CCRCs, life plan communities, was founded here and is still headquartered here. So others, Brightview, which is senior living owned by there's some Beth Am members, I think, in the ownership, and it's locally owned, has dozens of properties at this point. Again, most of theirs are typically IL, AL, and memory care. And Springwell, which is Mount Washington, is again that same mix. Questions? The next one, again, this is much more typical of what's out there today, is assisted living. And our count is 174 in the Baltimore Metro area, so lots of choices. Because you're now getting not just meals and hospitality, but you're getting ADL care, bathing, dressing, transferring, eating, toilet use, IADL care, which is one's assistance to daily activities of daily living. The other is I don't remember the I stands for, but it's basically more the financial and intellectual activities of daily living. And then you get some medications management here. Typically in assisted living, there's a med card. They take care of your medications. There is not assured, but there's usually an RN on staff part of the time. And so some healthcare function as well. Again, these are suburban communities. They only started being built in the US in the late 90s. So most of them are fairly new. And again, that's been the dominant model of what's been built more recently. 62 assisted living units, 20 memory care, resident capacity 90 and 100. This, I think, actually is a picture of the Sunrise in Pikesville. Their prototypes are all these Victorian mansions. And the way it's set up is the top floor is memory care. It has a little outdoor space, has its own dining, and it's secure. You can't just walk off because, again, you get people in memory care here that could wander. So examples, and again, these what distinguishes these from life plan is they are a monthly fee basis, and the fees, it'll be a base fee, and then it'll vary depending on what services you use and how much the services you use. Suburban, 10 years or newer, and probably somewhere a little bit larger than these, but that's the range of size. Sunrise Senior Living, again, is the people that started this. Brightview, again, Springwell, Spring House is operated by a company called ProMedica, formerly HCR Manor Care. That's on Ricerstown Road as well, just north of the shopping centers where the Trader Joe's is. Any questions? Okay, finally, memory care. A lot fewer standalone memory care. Again, most of it's provided within assisted living and other facilities. Fees get a little bit more expensive. Again, different people pay different things, so it depends on what service you actually use, how many hours of staffing. And these buildings are constantly evaluating your need for staff. Fees can adjust as you use more services. These are smaller, and I think the design is less important here than the services. So again, the staffing levels in memory care, whether it's a unit within a property or freestanding, 40 units, 60 resident capacity, and a lot higher staffing. But the quality of the care to deal with the patients, the residents, is the key. And I think what Sunrise typically talks about is they want to meet the residents where they are from a mental condition, and they're trying to create enjoyable moments. So they meet them where they are rather than trying to redirect their behaviors. Let's see, examples again, Arden Courts by ProMedica, which is up on Reisterstown Road. There's one on North of Browse, where the little across from the post office there in Riderwood are two examples of standalone memory care.
Jerry, I would also share that typically some purpose-built memory care communities tend to have places where residents can wander, and are designed typically to have, you know, the residents' rooms be more of a bedroom with the door open, and sort of adjusting staffing for people who tend to have more of their activity at night. So it really is, most memory care is at the assisted living level. There are some at skilled nursing level, but it really is a very specialized sort of training for the staff, as well as often the environment.
Thanks.
Yeah, I had a question. What is it that we're looking at now?
So that's just a memory care, specific purpose-built memory care building. I don't think it's one of the ones in Baltimore, but it gives you a sense of, it's a small building. It doesn't anything, you're not going into one of these, the building, you're going into it for the quality of the care. But you'll see some common spaces here, and again, about 40 units. There's some shared rooms in memory care often. So 60 resident capacity. And again, they will have secure open space, as Becki said, and it's just a matter of preference, location, how you feel with the people that run it, as to whether you choose this or a unit within an assisted living. And again, when we talk about life plan, the next session we'll get into more of the details here, but if you want to come back and look at other things to check, the state of Maryland, the other thing about Maryland being a center for seniors housing care is the state laws in Maryland have been very forward-looking from the beginning of this, and a state senator, I think Abrams, really was a forerunner, ran the Office of Aging for Maryland. So what's good about that is you get their state ombudsman you can call. There's data at the state level about what these communities provide. There's records about whether they've had violations of state requirements and that sort of thing. So you can get information if you want to do your due diligence.
Jerry, there's a question about what accounts for the very wide range of fees per month. And I would say typically that there are some communities where you're going to pay a base rate, and then different care levels on top of that. And then there are other communities where your fee is going to be sort of all inclusive, so that as your needs change, as long as you're within their licensure, that your fees would really stay the same. And I think it also depends on the location. Sometimes there are different, some communities have different amenities versus, an apartment versus a room, things like that. So that can account for some of the difference in the fees.
Right. I think all these communities provide real estate, a place to live, and a bundle of services. And the range is really depending on how much services you need. And one or two other things I think we should just touch on. Historically, again, the only way to get into an entrance fee, Life Plan community, was to pay the entrance fee. As they have diversified their offerings, it is now possible to go to a Life Plan community and be direct admitted as memory care or assisted living or skilled. So you want to just talk about that a little bit more, Becki?
Yeah, and that's it really depends on the community and also the availability. So, for example, Roland Park Place right now, where we have not always, we'll admit directly to our residential care assisted living, our memory care assisted living, or skilled nursing, either for short-term rehab or long-term care. We do, of course, prioritize the residents under the life, who bought in under the continuing care contract. And so if the assisted living is full, then the first priority goes to the independent living resident who's already here needing to move over. But as there's space, people can come in directly, and that's without, you know, sort of the large entrance fee. There's a community fee and a security deposit. And as you look at other communities, there are some where you will be able to come in directly, and others where you can only enter through independent living if you qualify medically for their independent living.
Right. Okay, so skilled nursing. One of the problems with this, and one of the reasons I think many consumers do not want to look at seniors housing, is they remember their parents or grandparents in skilled nursing. And skilled nursing, a lot was built in the 1960s when the federal government was subsidizing hospital and skilled nursing facilities. They are institutional, typically hospital-like rooms with double occupancy. More of a hospital room than an apartment, and you have some people that are very sick and skilled, so they were not particularly attractive, so what's happened is again, Paul Clausen is a Dutchman, was familiar with Dutch home-based, home-like care models, and he started developing in the U.S. private pay assisted living in the late 90s, and that industry just exploded. It was sort of like tech was today, and residents that had been going to skilled nursing for long-term care stopped going because they go to assisted living, cheaper, a much more residential environment, and much more pleasant experience. And so we saw a big shift. The number of skilled beds in the U.S. is declining, continues to decline, and the role of skilled nursing has changed. You will get long-term residents in there if long-term care residents, if they have really special medical needs that can't be dealt with elsewhere. But primarily, this is now for short stay. So if you go to a hospital for 3 days, Medicare will pay for up to 100 days in a skilled nursing facility to get rehabilitation, recovery from an illness. But otherwise, you're on your own in terms of paying. Most of this is private pay. As I say, the role of skilled is changing. Baltimore again has been sort of a center for this, good and bad. There's something called IHS, which have gotten a lot of trouble with the feds for, and so a lot of skilled nursing. And again, in the late 90s was very aggressively growing their capabilities and trying to take people out of a hospital sooner, save money. But the feds changed reimbursement severely in about 2000, and probably the top 7 skilled nursing companies in the U.S. went bankrupt, one of which was IHS in Baltimore. That's sort of irrelevant now, but just there are some examples that I think again good facilities here, primarily for short stay. Powerback, which is operated by Genesis, which is a publicly traded company based in outside Philadelphia. ProMedica, again, which is the old Manor Care, has a facility on Charles Street, and other facilities on Falls Road. And then there are some bigger ones, Keswick and Levendale, as well, but they're almost all paid doing the short term. That's really their focus.
And also the Powerback, the Genesis Powerback is who runs the rehab services at Roland Park Place.
And we got a public company I followed on as an analyst, and a well-regarded company. We had people that have stayed there. Barbara Mikulski was at Powerback when she was recovering from one of her illnesses a number of years ago. Okay, but any other questions? I would say also this is a very good-looking skilled nursing building, so they're not all like this. And again, you do get skilled nursing facilities with primarily. Let me step back on funding. Again, almost all of this care is private pay. In skilled nursing, you can get rehab and recuperative care paid for by Medicare if you have a 3-day hospital visit. Medicaid, which is for indigent, and you really have to be very low income to qualify for Medicaid, particularly in Maryland, will pay for skilled nursing care, although some of that's changing. So they may in some instances pay for assisted living rather than skilled as well. But there are skilled nursing facilities that really focus on the Medicaid longer term client, long stay client, and they're not this pretty. Okay. All right, life plan CCRCs. This is not a Baltimore facility, but it's one that I think was run by Brookdale, which is again a publicly traded company. But again, it starts to give you a sense of the scale. There's 17 in the Baltimore metro area. We'll give you a list of those. Entrance fee average is $330,000. We'll drill down on entrance fees and what it involves. And again, monthly fee is $1,800 to $10,000, and that here you're varying both by service levels, but also by type of unit, because you can get larger units and smaller units. But you want to add more on costs or?
Yeah, I mean, it's all over the board. I think as we dive a little deeper into life plan communities, you're typically going to see all these communities that started from different places. A lot of the communities started as sort of faith-based organizations, nonprofits, and then you see sort of different models enter the market as for-profits, typically with the refundable fees. And I think, you know, we've really kind of met in the middle over time to be able to offer as many different options to people as we can. And so you'll see sort of very different price points. And a lot of that has to do with how much, whether it's a life care or a fee for service kind of agreement, right? So if you're prepaying for medical expenses, for assisted living and skilled nursing, or if you're doing a fee for service pay as you go. And so there are different price points based on that. So there's a lot of variation. The one thing I will say is that there really are not any life plan communities in Maryland that I would say are not, well run. Maryland has a lot of regulations, a lot of requirements that need to be met. And so there's a lot to look into when you explore the communities, but I can't think of any that, particularly in this area, that I would say are not a good investment.
We'll drill down to this next session, but there was a community in Maryland that was being marketed during the COVID that did not get its pre-sale. So in Maryland, you can't open unless you get a certain number of pre-sales. So it was shut down. It never opened doors. Never built it. And again, that's part of the state regulation. They're not all states are that good. Okay, so again, in terms of size, 360 units is the average, not counting the two Erickson properties, which are over 1,500. Erickson's also building a new community in Howard County called Limestone Valley. And some of the communities that where we have Beth Am members who moved to residence, Broadmead, we have people from there, Blakehurst, which is in off Towson, Charlestown, Erickson, Edenwald, which is near the mall in Towson, North Oaks. We don't have somebody living there now that I know of this Beth Am resident, but a Beth Am member. But that's in Pikesville. So you drive down the road that Levinson's on, and you end up at this. And Oakcrest, which is also Erickson, and Roland Park Place. And Becki, we can pull this table, but I think Broadmead, Edenwald, Roland Park Place are not for profit. I think everything else here maybe for profit.
Right. There's a question about, are those private balconies on the left? I'm not familiar with the picture.
I think there probably are balconies. I mean, these are, again, I don't know where this is. It's one of the companies I followed. But we can, you can pull up the websites of any of these and see pictures, but they're very nice properties. This one is sort of dated and not as nice as some of the ones here. But, if you look at Edenwald, it's this sort of mass. It's a high rise across the mall, fairly dense. Some of the others are much more campus-like, have single family units, cottages, which some owners prefer. You have to get picked up and get to the central dining room. That's a little bit more of a walk, but you can live a more independent lifestyle with your own little cottage. Broadmead definitely has those. I'm not sure which other ones. Charlestown is where Erickson started, and is in Catonsville, and that is like, I think 1,800 units. And again, started 1 million, 100, 1 million, another 100 a dining room, and it just grew over time. But he's really developed that model, and again, it's a slightly lower price point than some of these others. Any other questions? And we'll drill into this a lot next week. Okay, let's talk about home health care a little bit. Again, I think very not well understood at all. There is, again, some public money for this if you're poor, but mostly it's private pay. Managed care companies, if you have certain conditions, or hospitals, you have certain conditions where you can get IVs at home or whatever, that may be covered by Medicare, but covered by a managed care plan. But if you want to put together a comprehensive home care plan, it's just much more complicated than you think, because again, you've got various services, they get various reimbursements at different prices, different people do different things. there are 27 home care providers that we found in the metro area. One thing I should also say here is that I think a lot of people want to stay home. It's familiar, and if you can afford it, you can bring this stuff in, and you can hire people directly, or you can hire people through an agency. And we certainly have friends that have done that and have 24/7 care in their home and are happy with the arrangement. But it's expensive. I think our estimate was about $60,000, and the companies that provide long-term care insurance give you estimates of what these services cost, and we have some of those to go forward. But for full-time care, it's expensive, and I think it's difficult to manage because the supervisors for these people can't be everywhere, and so there's a certain amount of responsibility that goes to the owner. And if somebody doesn't show up, if you're paying the people, it's your problem. If you're paying an agency, they should deal with it. But it's not. It requires some work. The other thing is I think home care is changing. You're seeing big managed care companies starting to buy home care companies, healthcare and drugstore companies buying home health. So for what we're seeing on the where the urgent care centers, where a lot of those are now owned by managed care companies or hospital systems, home care is becoming part of larger companies, and not quite sure where that's going to go, but I think the focus is going to be increasing on using home care to bring down the costs for hospital people coming out of the hospital and preventing people from going back to the hospital. But it's not, the focus is not going to be on meeting the needs of individual clients so much, but trying to drive down healthcare costs. And there's an article in the Times or the Journal on Saturday talking about New York State, where home care is an entitlement for Medicaid, and they're spending huge amounts of money on it, and a lot of concern about fraud, a lot of concern about quality, and the biggest issue there is there just aren't people to do these jobs. And you certainly are reading about problems with COVID, with lack of nurses in the hospital. Home health is very similar to. It's a real struggle to try and get people and good people to do this. And again, I think that's one of the advantages of being in a facility that manages your care and provides a whole range of services. Is you don't have to worry about if you can't find people, and again, in what's going to be increasingly tight labor market.
I would also share that, I mean, I know for us, we see people in the independent living who, when they have a need, will decide that they want to hire home health to stay in their independent living apartment, and that's okay. I think what some people find when they're deciding between staying in their independent living apartment and moving to an assisted living environment is that in the independent living, when they're hiring a home health agency, that person that's going to be with them is there with a 4-hour minimum. So there's somebody there with them in their space for that duration. And so for some people, once they kind of wrap their head around that, they'll decide that they like to be in the assisted living environment where someone comes in, helps with those things they need help with, and then go away. And are available if needed, but aren't necessarily right there all the time. So that's something people sometimes don't consider. For some people, that's great, and they want somebody right there all the time. For some people, it's a big change in their lifestyle.
I think just adding on that, I think again, it's a very personalized decision where you want to live, what size unit you want to live in, what kind of care you want to live in. And again, if you can afford it, you can craft a variety of care. So if you want to be in a big apartment with full-size apartment, full-size kitchen, but you need a lot of assistance, you can hire home care, and you can do that. But again, I think I think the key points we're trying to make here is that there are benefits from considering your options in advance. And we'll drill down on this in a little bit more in just a second. And people I've talked to, and Becki can give me her views. You can take a year or more to find a facility that you're comfortable with that meets your needs. And we started at time looking at a condo without any issues about care. But I had some people tell me that people either take months or they do it in less than a week, because what is more typical, unfortunately, and this is one of the things we're really trying to convince you of, is that if you wait until a spouse dies, somebody's got a health issue, you've got to place somebody quickly. The hospital's going to try and get you out, get your loved one out, and you've got to take what units are available, and what facilities you can find. Again, for the senior, if they're having a health issue or just dealing with the stress of a spouse passed away or something, they really have very limited ability to participate actively in that program. Whereas if you plan ahead, you can pick a facility whether you decide to move or not. But it's better to plan ahead, even though again, as I said, seniors don't want to look at this stuff. But and I think the other couple points we'll drill down on this more is is a very good amount of research that's saying life plan communities offer significant benefits physically and mentally, both in quality of life and even extending life a bit if you move in while you're still healthy. And transitioning while you're still healthy with a spouse is a lot less challenging than trying to move while you're also dealing with other health issues or family issues. Any questions about any of that? We'll move on. Okay. We're going to spend a lot of time on this, but it might be something we want us to come back to. What's happening is, I think the seniors, again, particularly the baby boomers, I'm boomer, I'm 72, and a lot of our friends that are thinking about this are that age or probably in their early 80s. But again, a lot of seniors are not looking at seniors housing. They're looking at other alternatives. So they might go from a single family house to an active adult community. I know, again, contemporaries of ours have done that. This place has pickleball, which and social activities, but there's no health care. Again, you could bring in home health. You're getting one story. You're getting accessible units. You're getting some social activities. You're getting like-minded people, but it doesn't really offer support structure. But that is, again, you can buy a unit in those things or rent in some cases, and it is an alternative we're seeing people look at. Primarily, you get a unit that's physically more accommodating than, say, a traditional single-family house with stairs. But NIC, which is one of the big trade organizations based in Annapolis that tracks occupancy and vacancy and prices, is starting to track active adults because they see that as increasingly part of the market.
Jerry,
Yes.
there's a question. What if your kosher is home care the only option?
As far as I know, the Associated has a kosher assisted living, and I think there's a few other small ones. And I don't, North Oaks is the one that serves almost exclusively the Jewish market. Really, that's their prime target. But I don't think they're kosher as well. You can get, I think facilities are, and Becki, you may speak to this, are sensitive to those issues, but they're not going to give you a kosher meal.
Right, I think Levendale may, but that's not in terms of life plan community, I'm not aware of any.
Okay.
In this area, maybe closer to DC, I could be wrong.
Right, and I think some of them, like in my, I had aunts and uncles that were in a Hebrew Home for the Aged in Yonkers, I think it is north of New York, and there's a community in Boston called something on the Charles that's really well done, but is again is sponsored by the Jewish community there. But again, I don't think there's necessarily provide kosher food as well. But you can't get it except in limited places in Maryland. There's also mixed age apartments. There's a concept that I didn't put in the notes here, but called NORC, Nationally Current Retirement Community. And what you see up and down Rice Road, particularly, is people that live in or move to condos, apartments that need some support, and they're getting home health or they're getting health through the Associated. And again, this is probably more for moderate income, but that is something Associated, I think, has done a very good job of, is providing support to those families and individuals and giving them the opportunity to live in an apartment without and trying to get them the care they need. But it's not easy to blend it. You don't get everything that you get in a dedicated property. And moving with a family member, one of the things that we see here, and again, I live in a place called Highfield House, which is 40,000 North Charles Street, so it's a condo, has a range of ages and households. But our next door neighbor, his wife passed away this past year, but he was her caregiver, even though he was in his 80s. And I think it takes a real toll, I suppose, my own parents, on if a couple, one becomes the caregiver for the other. The person may get great care, but it really takes a toll. And I think the other thing that Becki and I talk about a lot, but when you're at home, you don't get the same kind of social interactions you get in a community. And I think one of the things that I see is people that choose to be either in their existing home or in an apartment. There's a lot more options now with food delivery and Uber, and for people to get around. And but your social life starts shrinking because your friends die. You don't see them that often. It's difficult sometimes to get out. You've got physical limitations, and again, being in a community is just much more stimulating than having a home health companion for a few hours in your house. Okay. So discussion, we've covered a sort of a range of activities here, and again, we'll have you come back and talk to questions. But one of the things we want to just talk about is why it makes sense. Well, I guess key points to take away. Most of long stay seniors housing care is private pay, not Medicare, not Medicaid. And again, I think many people still think that the government will pay for this. It just doesn't happen unless you have long-term care insurance. and not many people do. It's one of the best things my broker ever did for me is get Caroline to buy it at a time when they were selling them too cheap, and we bought it for a fixed price in our 50s, and never had to pay a monthly rate. So, but long-term care insurance, it can be a real advantage and cover these costs, and we can drill into that as we talk more about life care. They're wide overlapping and at times confusing housing and care alternatives. So I think what you probably got a sense of is you can get IL with home care, AL with memory care standalone, a little bit of all of that in a life planning community. And again, there's lots of choices, lots of very good choices. But what's right for you, I think, is again a very individualized situation. And one of the things we're just trying to tell you is if you go look and decide for yourself what's right for you, and make clear that your family understands that. Baby boomers don't see themselves as old. There's again, one of my neighbors who went to Roland Park Place at 97. And again, we won't use names, but she said to me, in all honesty, she said, I'm going to have to admit that I'm old moving to Roland Park. Her daughters were in their 60s, and none of them lived here. And she was, she's wanted to stop driving because she had a little bender, but at 97, she was thinking, I don't want to live with these old people. I'm old. So there's a lot to overcome, but it is worth planning ahead and moving in advance of a health and family crisis, because you have greater control over where you live, the type of unit, the care mix, and again, I see very few people, my contemporaries in their 70s or 80s, actively looking, shopping. Becki, you want to add more there?
Yeah, it's really across the board, and I will say people do sometimes move in their 60s, and without any health issues, and that happens sometimes too. But it is interesting because really the thing that I have learned in being here is that you really, the people in the community, the residents, they're only old until you get to know them, and then they're just people. And so I will say I have not, really heard people say, I moved too soon, I wish I had waited. We hear the opposite. And I think it is important to consider that it is easier when it's your decision and you are deciding. So it is good to plan ahead, and also, to move while you're well. It doesn't get easier to move as you get older. But that being said, it's a very personal decision. And I do encourage people to involve their families as much as possible, but still make sure you're making your own decision ultimately.
And in data too, and there's a study that's now going into its 5th year, I think, of comparing seniors in the community versus seniors in life care communities. And there's fairly good data that your health, your longevity, your social interactions will be much better in a community than if you're just living in an apartment or living at home. Okay. Life care communities, again, I'm Becki works for one, I'm on the board. The real advantage is there, just the scale and the amenities. And again, if you go tour, you'll see it, and it may not matter to you, but certainly particularly pool with multiple dining venues. Erickson has its own Medicare Advantage plan in most of their communities in Baltimore. So their staff will go with you to the hospital because you're part of their Medicare managed care. Other places, Roland Park and others have affiliation with MedStar now, and we'll talk about that more. But again, the range of programs, outings is and just the quality of the facilities is really nice. And multiple dining venues, multiple bars, and just to come back to something Becki said. So I met a gentleman who's a new resident at Roland Park Place, and I was there for a board Christmas party. He was at Hopkins for 40 years as a professor of sociology. Came the year I graduated, so I didn't really know him, but we had lots of people in common. I just had a great evening. Probably chatted with him for about half an hour as the party was winding down. So there really are interesting people as well. I think at many of these communities. Okay. What other questions do you have? I think. I've got one for you then. How many people have actually toured a community? We could raise hands or. Okay, you can raise your hand within the program too, as well as physically raise your hand. So, my screen is mostly with the. Should we stop the share for a second and see if we can get it raised? I'm going to stop the share for just a second. All right, so how many hands do we have? 4. 4 or 5. How many are you counting?
I think I see 6.
6, okay. So 6 out of 26. It's pretty low. And again, for a range of ages out here, but it's definitely worth doing, and just so you understand what your choices are. And people are happy to have you obviously come visit. So with maybe just a couple more things of context, and then we can wrap this up unless you have more questions. Occupancy in assisted living and across the board here, all choices, all types of senior housing declined a bit because of the COVID. These facilities were closed, couldn't have visitors to try and control the outbreak, and it just made it, and people were reluctant to move anyway because of COVID. Although the housing market has been strong, that's starting to rebound, but there are choices out there. People are anxious to fill their remaining beds. What the industry continues to be excited about, investors continue to be excited about, is there's a lot of seniors. So the boomers are a very big population. They're in their 70s now, and I guess ranging from like 60 to 75 or so, and so there's lots of demand coming, but there are openings in communities now, and people are anxious to have you visit. So, what other questions we have?
Yeah, I don't know if I quite understood one thing you said about the staff would go to the hospital with you if you went to the hospital.
So, and Becki can fill this in more for maybe what Roland Park may do, but again, most of these facilities have some relationship with a healthcare provider. Springwell in Mount Washington is affiliated with LifeBridge, which is Sinai. Roland Park Place now has a relationship with MedStar for medical care, but at Erickson, and I'm not aware of any other community in Baltimore other than theirs that do this. They have their own managed care plans. They have their own. Under Medicare, you can be a fee-for-service with a supplemental and a drug, or you can have a Medicare Advantage plan, which is a managed care product that covers your Medicare. And what they do is so they have a fully staffed, multiple physician clinic on site because their communities are so large, and they provide services specifically tailored to the residents. So if you don't have somebody from family to go with you, they will go with you to the hospital. That's one of the perks of being a Erickson person. But you've got, I think, any of these facilities, you've got medical care backing up, and you've got an advocate and someone who's looking to manage your care. And we can talk to the panelists when they do the presentation about that. But I think that's one of the benefits. Again, it tends to be more available at larger facilities. Assisted living is not going to have a physician there necessarily every day, certainly, and not on call. Usually a skilled nursing will have a physician on call and will be in the building every day. But again, at Erickson, there's healthcare people there all the time, serving people's needs 24/7. Becki, you want to add any more to that?
Yeah, for Roland Park Place, we have the physician here at the clinic during typical kind of business hours. The nice thing about being in a continuing care community is that, if an independent living resident has a medical issue, during off hours in the middle of the night, there is always an RN here on site that can attend to them. But if it's, it's a 911 emergency, they're going to call 911 because they're a nurse and not a physician. But we do also have our chaplain typically will go to the hospital with people if she's available. If you've got a medical appointment, we provide transportation within a 10-mile radius. And residents can also, if they're in the assisted living side and they need someone to go with them, they have a nursing assistant go with them. In the independent living side, if they wanted a nursing assistant to go with them, they could hire someone through what we call our PAL program. And someone would be able to go to planned doctor's office visits with them.
And I think my view of healthcare is it's not going to get better in America, because I think the physicians that are the boomers, physicians are retiring or starting to retire. Nurses retired in large numbers because of COVID. So having someone that you've got a long-term relationship with is going to monitor your care and advocate for you is a real benefit.
I have a question. I'm unclear why you had life plan communities in one category, and then you had life plan communities / CCRCs in a different category. Can you clarify that, please?
So CCRC and life plan community are the same thing. And CCRCs, which are continuing care retirement communities, were rebranded. Becki maybe had this to life plan because I think what people, and it's still true, what people see the product as is something that provides care as they age and maybe develop additional health needs over time. But the CCRC model was really focused on additional care, not an environment that would make it a pleasant place for you to live and keep you healthy. So I think that was the rebranding is that where it came from. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Becki?
Yeah, I would agree with that. The continuing care retirement community is not necessarily descriptive of the type of community.
Right. Well, we'll talk. What you get at life plan or CCRC, if you want to use the old term, is a contract that basically says we will provide you with all the care that you need, and you have different choices, which we'll get into, which are complicate this more than it needs to be in some ways, I think. That you can lock in the cost of that care. So if you're in assisted living, for example, and your needs go up, you need memory care, you need skilled, the prices are going to go up, and you're getting evaluated every month, every quarter for what your needs are. And so you're, and we'll put some better numbers on this maybe next time when we do the next session, but you could be spending $8,000 a month, $5,000 a month, and if you need skilled care, you're up to $14,000 a month. Whereas in a life plan community, they're committing to you to not charge you more for those services if you need them. You're paying the same rate. It'll go up with inflation, but you're buying yourself long-term care insurance in some respects.
So your first slide that had LPCs, and then you had a couple others, and then you had a final one that said LPC/CCRC. The first and that last one were essentially describing the same places.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And what I can do, I'll go ahead and screen share, and again, keep asking us questions, but I'll give you, I'll show you that list of places. This is later in the program, but you see a sense of what we're talking about. Hang on a second. Okay, so here's a list of life plan communities, and Suzanne, could people access this, or now I guess, or there's no, we put it up on the website if someone wanted to take a look at it.
Whenever you're ready, I can put it up on the website and I can share it by email.
Okay, so we can, why don't we just go ahead and send this out? Again, we'll use the PDF version, and but these are the 17 properties that exist that are life plan communities in the Baltimore metro area. And the ones that are sort of in north and northwest Baltimore, which are have had Beth Am members there before, are highlighted in green here. But this gives you a sense of their size, the mix of units. We'll come back to contract type next week, but that's where you buy a contract that it locks in your health costs long-term or not. And obviously it costs more to lock it in than not. We'll get into that in some detail. Accredited, there's an agency like the agency that accredits hospitals, accredits these. There's only 4, I'm sorry, there's not all are accredited. And if you need pets, that's here as well. And there's one at Providence Point in Annapolis that is under development. Are they open yet, Becki, or not?
I don't think so.
Okay, but you can commit to a unit now.
I think they're doing pre-sales now.
Okay. Okay.
And we may want to correct a typo on, I don't think Fairhaven's monthly fees start at 18,000. So we might have an extra.
I think we'll correct that. Okay. Other questions? So we're just out of time, and I hope you've had it worthwhile. We're definitely looking for feedback, and I think with this session and the next session, there's a lot of factual information we get you, but we also definitely want to have your questions, and I think it'll be interesting to hear from the residents as well, what they like or don't like. Any other last questions before we wrap it up? Is there anyone else in chat?
Yeah, so somebody asked if the recording will be shared. Yes, you just need to give us a tiny bit of time because our person who's in charge of editing is brand new and we're just getting up to speed. So,
Right.
but we will share it and it will be on our website as well.
And Suzanne, I was thinking we would wait till the end and then put them all up, or we're gonna try and put them up one by one.
Yeah, we'll see what we can do.
Okay.
I'll be in touch with about that.
Thanks,
Great.
Jerry.
Somebody also asked if we will be talking about long-term care insurance at some point.
I think that's something we could do. Usually when you're asking, it's too late. But I think that certainly could be a program that people are interested. I think the long-term care insurance, you've got to buy it to make it economically sensible. You've got to buy it when you're relatively young, probably in 50s or earlier. And the product that I use that I referred to earlier, again, that's not, I'm not sure it's available at all, but it's very, very limited. But today, you buy it and the cost can increase over time depending on what their experience has been. So it's not a fixed cost at one point in time. Becki, you have any more?
I mean, I would just say that we could probably talk a little bit about how it works in action for those who already have it, and how it would apply to a community and what that looks like.
But we could, that's the sort of program we could do subsequently and have a couple of people in that are experts in it and talk about it. So if that's something you're interested in, let us know. Anyone else? Okay. Well, I hope you had it useful. And again, if you have questions, you can send them to us between now and the next session. Next session will be life care, life planning communities. We'll drill down on the fees and costs and what it's like. And then again, I think we'll have the Beth Am members who are on our panel so far are Stuart Berman, Herb and Goldman and Harriet Goldman, and Dovey Khan, who's at Edenwald, and Fred Katz, who's at Pickersgill, which is not technically a life planning community, but functions much the same way. It does. It's been around 200 years, and again, I think it was faith-based backed, and again, it's not an interesting model, but provides similar services. So they're in Towson, and we may have one or two more before the 27th. All right, any last word?
I just want to say thank you so much. And just a reminder, the next meeting is not on a Monday because of Martin Luther King. So we'll be meeting next Tuesday at 7 o'clock on the same link that you used to access today.
Thanks, Jerry.
Thank you. We appreciate it.